Hello and welcome to Bedson and Coffey Unfiltered,
where we will be discussing fitness, lifestyle, healthy eating habits, relationships, gas station performance pills, answering romantic queries. You have anything else, Tyler? Is there anything? Do you need help with anything right now? Because I feel like I'm in a position where I can help you with it.
I mean, and everything else that we come across as we go. But you know what it's going to be, right?
It's going to be unfiltered.
Welcome. I'm Tyler Bedson, and this is...
I'm Eli Coffey.
And what are we talking about today, Eli? We got some cool subjects.
We're talking about all kinds of stuff today.
It's going to go different ways each time.
That's right. Talking about some coaching and approaches to coaching, diet, things that affect prep. Broad spectrum, a lot of things.
Where do we want to start? I'm thinking what I wanted to talk about today is the difference between how we may coach somebody based on experience or what they're doing as far as, what sport they're in.
100%.
There's so much that goes into this, and I don't think that people realize how much it can change based on what you're doing or how similar it can be.
Absolutely.
So for example, what is your way of doing things if you say have a general nutrition client versus a strength athlete or a jiu-jitsu fighter?
So, the assessment is going to be similar in that I'm going to collect as much information as I can. Once I send them the form and look over everything, considering their goals, considering where they're at now, their experience, so on and so forth, health, medications, blood work, etc. But where things will vary will begin to be as far as how far we'll push with what their goals are or what their needs are. Like say if I have someone who's just a general health client, a lifestyle client, then, obviously getting things in check. If something is out of range with their health or something, obviously that being paramount. If somebody is an athlete and their health is in check, then, obviously now we're putting performance kind of ahead with everything because we have all those other markers in place.
Yeah.
But essentially, first and foremost, I am of the mindset and the goal that health is paramount regardless of what I'm coaching you for.
Yes.
And I'm not going to go against that for the sake of aesthetics or performance. So, if we start sacrificing health markers for performance or aesthetics, you're going to see all those drop off. Mm-hmm. You're going to grow better when you're healthy. You're going to perform better when you're healthy. But, again, with the lifestyle clients or health clients compared to an athlete that has a competition coming up, it's just a matter of how far we push toward things. And if we have a deadline or a finish line, then obviously we have to make sure that we're not missing anything.
Yeah.
Like say if you have somebody and their goal is just to lose X amount of weight or get healthy, if they have a bad week, okay, well then we just lost a week. If you have 16 weeks before this event and they have a bad week, well, all of a sudden now we're behind the 8 ball. We got to push a little harder. We got to make adjustments. We may miss something,
Yeah. What I like to say is I like to meet somebody where they're at.
Sure.
So say we have somebody and they're just getting into fitness and they don't really know anything about food or how to cook it or what to do with it or how it affects your performance. I'm going to try to meet them there best I can.
Sure.
But if I have somebody and they have a timeline for a competition, it's going to be a whole different ball game.
Yeah, you got to hop on the fast track for some of that sometimes.
Oh yeah, you have to put everything in place, and it has to be in a very specific order with nutrient timing, training schedule, routine. All that stuff matters for somebody that's more of an advanced athlete. While I have somebody that's a beginner, and I may be able to just do 4 meals a day. They don't have to train, and they can still lose weight, and it's just more, hey, let's just teach them how to eat.
Yes, and out of the gate, depending on someone's, muscle growth is an adaptation.
Yeah.
Strength gain is an adaptation. So and you're adapting to that stress from the strength training. With that, if somebody has never really done much of that, then this is going to be such a new stimulus.
Oh, yeah.
That they're going to respond differently. You'll have some people and the goal will be to lose weight, but they'll start to build a little bit of tissue out of the gate because they've never had this kind of stimulus or stress on their body, and that lifting is so new. And you'll see them start to get stronger even, as they're getting leaner. And that's not outside the norm for somebody who's never done that. But after you've been in that game and, for an extended period of time and your body's adapted to that, you're not going to see that type of thing. But
you got to be real specific.
Exactly. So, but yeah, absolutely. It's so different because, again, you adapt over a period of time. But in doing so, you start to understand the process a little better. You start to understand what goes into it a little bit better. And then some of them, because they know they've been in the game long enough, they know the process, then you can kind of push them a little bit harder.
Oh, yeah.
Because they know that, they know what's going to come from that.
Yeah. So I like to use an example of, a general nutrition client. I'll use my dad. My dad's somebody I coach. And, the reason I coach my dad, what are his goals right now? He wants to live longer.
Yeah.
That's it. He just wants to live longer and have accountability to make sure he can still go enjoy his retirement, but not be fat and not be unhealthy and not die.
Yeah.
So that's more of his goals right now. So what do I do for him? I'll put together something of foods that he really enjoys. More of his stuff is like walking, and
Sure.
he'll weight train, but it's with what he has in the garage.
Exactly. It's all relative to his situation,
Yes.
his needs.
And then, we have somebody like, I'll use myself for an example here. I have to be extremely strict to get an ounce of progress now. And my goal is to, go to a national level show in 2025. Well, that leaves me about 2 years to knock out every single thing I can and be perfect every day.
Yes.
To be sure I'm at that national level.
Yes.
And that's two very entirely different situations. So how you coach somebody generally is going to be very, very different in how strict I am on them as well.
100%.
Yeah.
And, like my oldest client is a lady named Priscilla, and she's 83.
Yeah.
And she comes to my gym. She's awesome. She's so hardcore. Like you guys.
Yeah.
Brian, my assistant coach there, Brian trains her, and he'll have to hold her back some. Like she'd be like, "We need to add more weight." And he's like, "We're good here. We're all right." But she's so awesome. But anyway, she came to me because she had been, a little more sedentary over a period of time. She'd always been active. She'd always went to the gym, but, she'd gained a little more weight than she'd wanted, and she wanted to lose weight. So setting her up and coaching her, and being mindful of your needs, your health, everything when you're 83,
Yeah.
like making sure that she's not only got, enough calories and everything to get through her day, but also staying in a deficit, but not so much that we risk dropping her blood sugar, her get lightheaded, have issues, because she's still driving, all these things. Whereas if you have a younger athlete, then we might be able to push a little harder without those risks.
Yes.
Or even on top of that, you've got an athlete who is enhanced and we can push even farther in a deficit because we're not going to be as, as risking,
Or you got some aids there.
Exactly.
To help you.
Exactly. You're not going to risk being catabolic as easily, so you can push them in a bigger deficit. Again, it's all subject to the individual and relative to the situation.
So I like to think of it with different people as far as training as well. I'll even change that based on where the person's at. So
100%.
You think of a beginner. Okay. So when we first stepped in the gym, I think you can even remember these times, like we'd go in the gym and, what a typical workout might have been for us was, 24 to 30 working sets because we didn't know how to train with intensity. That's what we needed to nail form and really figure it out. But, as we've gotten better down the road, I know what movements work and I can maybe get by with, 8 to 12 working sets or sometimes even less for some people.
Yes, your efficiency becomes better.
Yeah.
It's like anything else, trying to, any kind of job you do, as you do it longer, you get more efficient at it.
Yeah.
And I talk to my clients as far as movements, being efficient, being deliberate with those movements.
Exactly.
You see a lot of people go in the gym and they're going through the motions, but it's like, okay, well, you stopped at 15, but did you have more?
Yeah.
I didn't really see your reps start to slow down any. I didn't see you, you didn't at any point break posture, signaling that you're near that end or you're breaking, failure. but being not only efficient but very deliberate with your movements and understanding, okay, well, this is what I have to do to get the most out of this.
Yeah, and that can take years to teach, years to learn.
Getting in that connection too.
Yeah, you have some, and it's people think they are in pain during a workout. Like they're like, oh, that hurts. Well, sometimes I'm like, is that the pain from your muscle or is it like a joint?
Correct.
And most often it's usually like a muscle, and they're just not used to the pain of lifting a weight and breaking past that intensity level. It's not like they're hurting themselves. It's just like the sensation you're supposed to feel.
Yeah. And it's again, it's that stimulus that's creating a scenario for growth. We're breaking that muscle down, like we talked about before. You're breaking that muscle down while we're working out. And if you're thinking about that and you're making those, that's resulting in acute tears in that tissue, that in itself doesn't sound like a pleasurable sensation. So, it's like, Wolff's Law states that the body can and will adapt to stress. And when you think about that, it's relative to bone density, but it kind of applies to tissue in general. If you think about like even the calluses on your hand, you're out using like a shovel or something and you're, grinding that skin and it's building those blisters that turn to calluses.
Yeah.
It hurts.
Oh, yeah.
And then after a while, those calluses build, and then it takes more and more and more to damage that same skin. It's the same concept here. Like it's going to hurt. There's going to be that discomfort, but there's a difference in the muscle aching from that work or the joints hurting from something being out of alignment mechanically. Or you have an injury. There's a difference in something hurting or being injured.
Yeah.
And again, a lot of that comes with time and experience and understanding the differences in those.
Yeah.
That you only get from doing this for a period of time.
The only way to learn is to do it for a long period of time. Like I said, it used to take me 4 or 5 sets to get something out of one exercise. When I first started, that's what it took me, because I was like, I wasn't really doing it perfectly. I was trying to, more just move the weight and everything. I didn't really understand the concept of mind-muscle connection.
Yes.
Right? I was just moving things. And then when I actually slowed it down,
right,
and I really felt myself using that muscle, it changed everything.
Yeah.
But it took me a few years to really establish perfectly how to do that. And even now to these days, there's some movements where I'm like still like messing around with it. I'm like, I can do that better.
100%.
Yeah.
And that's why a lot of times out of the gate when I have, and sometimes it's a novice lifter, but sometimes maybe it's a more intermediate lifter, but I feel like they need to improve. I'll have them do, I'll work with tempo a whole lot. It's like move it slowly. Yeah. You're going to feel that. Move it slowly. Yeah. You'll start to feel what muscles are engaging. But you do a 5-second eccentric, you're going to feel what's activated. So, I'll do that a lot. I'll do that a lot too with my grapplers, where isometric strength is a really big deal. And I think a lot of times people don't consider this, but moving weight slowly, pauses and so on. Yeah. That carries over to strength really, really well, but also that isometric strength. But I was not going into a different topic there, but teaching somebody to move weight slowly and learn how to feel that. Yes. And feel that muscle working instead of just simply blindly moving weight. You can move more weight than you can feel.
That's major part of my process when I start coaching pretty much anybody. What I like to call it is my mechanical phase, because I'm working on their mechanics.
100%.
And what it consists of is, like you said, eccentrics, pauses, concentrics. We're trying to isometric holds. We're trying to make a process of eliminating the ego from the lift that may have been developed over time before working with us. So what I'm doing is, I'm basically eliminating them moving the weight by making it harder for them, so they have to drop the weight to learn how to use it correctly.
Absolutely.
And for many, they get with me and they're like, they look at the paper and they're like, oh, that workout looks real easy. And I always get a text afterwards like, that was humbling experience.
100%.
Yeah. And because they're using their muscle now instead of, the joints.
Yeah. And a lot of times especially when people start talking about numbers, like, well, I squat this much, or I bench this much, or I do this much. Yeah. If you are shortening the range of motion, or you're adjusting your body mechanics or whatever to give you a mechanical advantage in that movement, you're not really increasing capacity, you're increasing compensation. Yeah. Doing it, once you figure out how to do that movement, doing it the same damn way every single time.
For every rep.
For every single rep. I tell my clients, the only difference I should see in your first rep and your last rep is the speed of the bar. That's the only difference I should see. You shouldn't be contorting. You shouldn't be changing body mechanics. You shouldn't be shortening your range of motion unless we're going into like partials or something. But with that being said, the only thing I should see differently from the first rep and the last rep is the speed of that bar. Failure doesn't mean when you can't move it by any means necessary. Failure means when you can no longer move it through that given path with the same mechanics.
Mechanical failure.
Mechanical failure, exactly right. So, whenever you see somebody starting to contort, it's like, you didn't randomly find 3 more reps.
No.
That's new muscle moving that way.
Yes, you had to use something else to get it.
Exactly.
That's why you see a lot of people when it's like they're trying to grow quads, for example, and they're doing squats. Well, they try to keep it in their quads and focus on that. But whenever they start failing, what's going to take over first? The glutes and the hamstrings. So they start using those to get more reps that they're no longer using what the muscle they're intending to train in the first place.
Right.
Yeah.
And another example of that is you'll see people like, we'll use that squat for the same example, but rather than dropping and lowering the bar through lowering their hips, they'll bend at the waist and shorten that range of motion. It's like, well, you're not really increasing. No. You're not increasing your capacity here. We're just shortening that range of motion, or we're staying inside of these, ranges where you feel stronger because your ego won't allow you to drop that weight a little bit. So it's certainly in those movements, like you said, there, it's very humbling, but it teaches you how to move weight correctly.
Yes.
And that's where you can grow from. That's where you can start to build that foundation from.
So a big difference I see that, and I want to see your opinion on this as well, is I'll get a lot of, strength athletes and they want to get into bodybuilding. So as we've seen with powerlifting, it's more about, you're trying to get the weight up, you're trying to move it. That's the goal. So sometimes for some people, those mechanics go out the window in exchange for just, using fibers and muscle just to push. So whenever somebody's moving from powerlifting to bodybuilding style training or any type of training for a physique, how do we need to change it so that they are doing less of the, I call it like with the squats, the pop, lock, and drop it. Drop all the way down, and then some will just fight back up. So we need to change that. Do you think it's necessary to change that? Like, how would you change that if you have somebody switching from bodybuilding to powerlifting, where they don't need to maybe use as much mechanics, like slow eccentrics, but they need to use power?
So having worked with, myself, having done some strength, training as far as for powerlifting, having worked with Josh Bryant from Jailhouse Strong and some others, the thing that came very apparent to me is when we're talking about power, we're trying to give ourselves the best mechanical advantage to move as much weight as possible safely.
Yeah.
Okay. So we're trying to get set up in a manner where we're with bench press, we're retracting and depressing our scapula. We're arching in our thoracic spine. We're bracing. We're bending the bar, external rotation in the shoulders, drawing through our lats, all these good things.
Yep.
Now, that is going to recruit as much muscle as possible to move that weight, to move it safely. With bodybuilding, my goal is not necessarily to move as much weight as possible. My goal is the most amount of stimulus possible in that muscle.
Yes.
So sometimes that doesn't mean efficient as far as mechanically advantageous. Like when you think of some bodybuilding movements, like let's think of a lateral raise, for instance.
Yeah.
I would never hand you anything heavy in that manner. I'm never going to lift something heavy with a lateral raise in a real world application. So I'm considering that I'm in a less than efficient, less safe posture, so on, for the sake of working and exaggerating a certain muscle group. So with that, I consider that with weight. I consider that with movement. I consider that with everything. So like benching for power or doing like a, chest movement for hypertrophy, a lot of those things need to be considered. So whenever we're switching from one to the other, you have to kind of get it in mind. Okay, my body may not, my body doesn't know the difference in, the 5 pounds, 10 pounds difference in this weight, but it just knows what it feels. And you can reduce that weight significantly, move it slowly, and it feels terrible. It feels so heavy. So again, we're not as concerned whenever we switch to bodybuilding. We're not as concerned with necessarily moving. The weight is just there to create a stimulus.
Yes.
And in all seriousness, the older I get, the more I realize, okay, if I can get the same effect
Yes.
with less weight, damn, I'm going to feel better in my joints, all that stuff. So, I want to stress the hell out of that muscle and beat that muscle up without necessarily beating my joints up.
Yeah.
And that's where that helps out so much. Whenever you're wanting to do something for power and you're working toward a certain number, well, you've got to lift that amount. There's no way to avoid that. So yes, with training and so on, we're working with percentages and rep ranges, but at a point you're working up to a 1 rep max for that competition.
Yep.
Whereas with bodybuilding, there's really not any reason to max out or 1 rep or anything.
It's kind of detrimental to the training in a way.
It is. I think early on, people kind of get caught up with numbers. And I think in today's world, people begin to have gotten almost numb to that. Like they don't see it the same way because they see so much stuff online.
Yeah.
Like think of whenever you started lifting, how many guys could bench press over 400 in the gym?
But hardly any. Nowadays I see it
online.
You see a 21-year-old kid doing it at the gym just for fun,
Yep. And then too, you've got, and then the far side of that, you've got people using fake plates or whatever else. And so people, they can't really, the numbers almost, it's not the same as it could be or once was. So sometimes they think, well, I've got to lift this much to do this. And that's not the case at all.
Now, what I've discovered through trial and error and, even talking to other coaches who coach Olympians, talking to Olympians, I'd much rather do something, say like a shoulder press or a lateral raise. Like for shoulder press, for example, I'd much rather do like 90 or 100 pound dumbbells with slower eccentrics and try to touch something like the 140s or 150s with, choppy form. So, and I think it's getting into that mindset of like, all right, control the weight. Like we keep going back to, it's control the weight.
Yes.
And it's as simple as that. And you're going to get a lot more progress as far as muscular growth.
Yes. Yes. And that's just it. If that's what we're concerned with, and we're concerned with muscular growth and aesthetics, then the weight takes a back seat to the activation.
Exactly.
The weight is obviously the better you get, the bigger you get. You're not going to get a lot bigger without getting some stronger. You're not going to get a lot stronger without getting some bigger. So you can see the increases in that weight over time, but it's just a matter of continuing to get a stimulus effective for muscle growth.
Yeah.
That doesn't always mean it has to be something that's killing you for 2 reps.
Oh, no, absolutely not. I think that's kind of setting some people back as they continuously train only for power, that they forget to develop their muscular tissue along with it. So I think even for like strength athletes, I always tell them, like I see so many at the gym, they'll be like, I don't do my accessory movements. And they're only doing their big 3. And then they wonder why they get injured along the line and they're no longer able to power lift. And I'm like, well, you skipped part of this process. You still need to strengthen your muscle. You still need to train in a different way to be able to continuously lift these heavy weights for long periods of time.
Yeah. And paying attention to some of those muscle groups that maybe aren't quite as emphasized in that, like, when you start to see somebody and they're getting to that point near failure, okay, well, what's breaking mechanically first?
Yeah.
Now that begins to be extremely important when we're talking about strength. Okay. Like once he did a set of 8 there, but once he started getting to 5 and 6, we start seeing his knees cave in a little bit.
Yeah.
Okay, he's weakening his abductors. We're weakening his hips. We really need to strengthen those. Otherwise, that is going to get further and further exploited as we get stronger or the weight gets heavier on the bar.
Yeah.
Something too is like whenever you're talking about strength, we're dealing with margins. And the margin that I'm referring to here is the distance between your load and your limit. Okay. The closer that load gets to your limit, the smaller that margin becomes. And that's that margin for error.
Yeah.
Okay. If we've got something on there you can do for 15, well, we're afforded a few mistakes and still be able to get that set. If we've got something on there you can only do twice and you get outside of that path with your bar or anything else, now we're kind of screwed.
Yeah.
Like we're stuck or we're running the risk of getting in a position where we can get injured. Whereas with something that we're doing like for the 5-second eccentrics, we're doing with the, different rep ranges and so on, the load isn't so close to the limit that we can't correct ourselves or whatever else, because we're looking for failure a little later down the line. So we're building up to that rather than being kind of at the ceiling when we unrack it. And again, not knocking strength training, not knocking lifting heavy by any means whatsoever. But as it pertains to muscle growth, we're not having to, there's a difference in that type of hypertrophy versus just strength training.
What I've discovered over time, and I think is really cool, is when people come from a strength background and they go try to do something like bodybuilding, it's very cool to see how fast they can progress because they're not scared of heavy weight.
100%.
So they they're used to maybe doing 700 pounds on a deadlift. So if I tell them, hey, do 500, but do 8 to 12 reps,
sure,
they can do it.
Yeah.
They're not scared to do it. They can move up, and they just have lifted that weight before. And it's kind of cool to see that process and how fast they can progress from switching to just simply from 2 to 3 reps or 1 rep maxes to hypertrophy.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think, and I've seen this so many times, and I have people ask me a lot, in years past, how did you stay so strong while bodybuilding?
Yeah.
And for a physique guy, for a bodybuilder, I lifted a fair amount of weight. But it's because I applied the same intensity. And I think that's where a lot of people drop the ball. If you tell some people to do a set of 5, a lot of guys would pick something they can barely get 4 with.
Yeah.
If you tell them to do a set of 15, they'll pick something they can do 20 with.
Yep.
And that's the issue. Like if you can get stronger doing those sets of 10, 12, 15, so on, but it has to be with the same intensity.
Yes.
I'm not saying that's the way you would prep for a powerlifting meet, but what I am saying is whenever you begin to cut those sets shy and say, well, I got my 15. Yeah, but that wasn't 15. You had 20. Add some weight to it.
Yeah.
Make that set suck. When you get done with that set, it should suck. If it's those high rep sets, those are terrible.
Yeah.
If you start doing a set of 15 on squats, and it's so heavy you can't do 16, you're going to be seeing stars.
Oh, it's going to hurt.
It sucks bad.
Yeah, that's
how
one
you
thing
get stronger.
I've discovered too, which is great. The way I try to describe what I want with training for somebody training in a hypertrophy style is I'll put a rep range. So say, let's use an example like a dumbbell incline press. And I'll use a rep range of say 10 to 12.
Okay.
All right. So the reason I do that is because I want them trying to choose a weight where they fail in between 10 and 12 on their working sets.
Yes.
So if they get 12 or they get more than 12 or they feel like they could, that weight's probably too light. If they get less than 10, that weight's too heavy.
Sure.
So if they get in between that 10 to 12 range though, like say I got 12 reps and I was doing 110 pounds. Well, next week I know I should definitely try 115 pounds at the very least.
Exactly.
Right?
The goal being to work outside of that rep range.
Yes.
What was once heavy for 10, if I can do it for 13, that's linear progression. That's great. I need to add and come back down. And that's a great thing you just said there too is, and I can't stress this enough, but tracking workouts.
Oh, I do it religiously.
Yes. And I look back when I was a kid and you go in and you just kind of blindly go through the motions. And that's the one thing that if I could tell somebody, if they don't listen to anything else training wise, track your workouts.
Yeah.
Because you're not going to remember this week exactly what you did last week.
And there's so many ways to do it. I've done it in a book before, and then I found myself occasionally leaving my book at home, and that frustrated me. So what's always with me though? My phone.
Sure.
And I simply open my notes page, and I have each day, and I have the weight I did for my last working set.
Yeah.
And what I'll do is I'll literally delete that, and I'll change it each week, and I'll make sure that I beat those numbers in either reps or the weight I'm using or how well I perform. Yes. That set. If I take a video of the set and I'm looking at it, I'm like, I could have done better there. Like I still need to stay at this weight before I move up.
Yeah.
I'll go slower. Or I'll fix the mechanics on the rep slightly. And that is also a progression.
Yes. And I think sometimes people miss that. They don't even consider it. Before you add weight, try to make it harder. Yeah. Like that's another option
harder,
as well.
Which make it better.
Make it harder. Yeah.
Yeah.
And to touch on what you said there too, I'm in a position that allows me to do things a little differently, but all my things for lifting and everything are at my gym. So I'm very old school with this. I have a book. I use a log book because I like writing things down with a pen. Yeah. But I'll flip back and forth. I have a little paper clip on there and I'll look at my workout last week. And I say, okay, well, I did this. This is where I started at. I got this, so on. So this is where I'm going to start at this week. Yeah. And that helps me kind of, reference the past week. And that's not only good when we're trying to grow, but that's also great when we're trying to cut. Because, okay, well, if I'm cutting, I'm not going to be gaining a lot of strength at this point in my career. but I want to try to not lose.
I want to try to
reps.
maintain it.
I want to try to maintain that tissue. So I don't want to just take a guess and end up coming in shy. So I'm looking, okay, this is what I got last time. So this is what I want to try and at least achieve this time.
Because if not, like mentally, I see some people go in there and if they have the idea in their head, like I'm going to cut, it's like a placebo. Like,
oh my God,
I'm weaker. And it's like, you're not weaker.
No.
I've been all the way down to 50 or less carbs in prep, and I'm still lifting the same weight that I lifted when I started prep.
Yeah.
It may be, a few less reps.
Or your gas tank's empty.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
but I'm still trying to shoot and maintain at what I was lifting so I can make sure to maintain that muscle. And I think that's something people have to get through mentally to realize, like, I'm not weaker. Like, that's not how it works. You still should be able to perform well even off of lower amounts of food.
Yes. And you run into that a lot of times, and I'm gonna hurt some people's feelings here with real heavy guys. I don't want to cut because I'm gonna lose strength. Actually you're gonna set yourself up to gain a lot more muscle and be a lot stronger if you will get in a better position out of the gate. So especially if you have a lot of body fat already, you're not gonna lose strength, man.
That's my first thing I do whenever I have somebody that starts with me and they're overweight. Let's get you in a better spot to grow.
100%.
Well, some of these people, they don't want to do that part. They want to immediately go hop on something and just grow, push more size. Yeah. And if you're out of shape already, what's going to happen if you push more size? You're going to get more out of shape.
100%. You're going to get fatter because, and this is, I think, everybody always goes back to the whole testosterone steroid thing. Insulin is extremely anabolic.
Yeah.
And when we begin to get excess body fat, we lose sensitivity to insulin.
Yeah.
Okay. So we're not going to grow the same way. Our blood sugar levels aren't going to return to baseline the same way. We're going to be more apt to gain body fat and do so quickly. So we can't manipulate carbohydrates around the workout, post-workout, all these things to get that blood sugar spike, resulting in that insulin spike and flood the muscle with nutrients the same way. So we're not going to grow the same way. I'm not saying that we have to get somebody stage lean for them to build, but if you got 30% body fat, then you've already eaten enough. Like we need to dial back a little bit and get you leaner so that you can actually, begin to grow correctly, and obviously getting health markers in place.
Whenever I'm cutting somebody from like an overweight point, with blood work, like we were talking about, sometimes I don't have them do it until about 4 weeks on the diet because I want to see how much just the diet alone improves
100%
what they're doing, because I know if we do their numbers just to start, sometimes I like to see it, of course, just to compare, but just 4 weeks on like a constructed plan with proper nutrients, you'd be surprised. Well, you've seen it. How well that those numbers change just by just eating the correct foods or living a slightly different lifestyle, like drinking more water, cutting out soda, cutting out alcohol. Simple stuff can make such drastic changes alone. It doesn't have to be, throw the whole kitchen sink at it to start.
Exactly. And depending on how far someone has gone or veered off the road and eating terribly, eating processed foods and so on, simply, doing the simple things, removing soda, removing, fast food, these type of things can literally make a day and night difference in their blood work and their health, how they feel.
I've seen people lose 12, 15 pounds the first week.
Yes. Same.
Just because I was like, hey, drink more water, cut out soda, cut out alcohol, no free meal this week.
You can tell how much processed foods and junk somebody was eating in the first week of adhering to a clean diet.
Yeah.
Especially whenever you start doing those, like we talked about before, those one ingredient foods that are less inflammatory.
Yes.
You will see that if somebody's been eating poorly, they'll piss themselves to death that first week, letting go of all that retention.
Oh yeah. All that water they're holding, it's like you said, it's inflammation. The body gets inflamed, the gut gets inflamed. You're eating these processed foods, you're eating grease, you're eating stuff your body can't digest. It ferments sometimes in your stomach too, and it just sits there. So you just got a bunch of waste.
Yes.
And then, you could lose 5 to 7 pounds, maybe more waste. And that's wild to think about. But whenever you just change your lifestyle and small adjustments, sometimes where people need to start. And that's what I've really started to establish with each client I take on. I'm like, what are your goals right now? Where are you starting? What do you have access to? What do you do for work? These are things we need to discuss so I can make the plan set to them. So I'm not going and getting them, too overwhelmed, because I think that's where a lot of people fail. They try to go 100%.
Yes.
And they feel like if I'm not 100%, this isn't worth it. And what I try to get to people's heads is I'm I want you to be about 80 to 90% if you're not competing. I want you to just be a decent range so you can learn how to do this long term. This becomes just what you do.
Yeah. And that's a great point. Like, essentially what we want to do is, if I'm working with a client, a lifestyle client, a health client, or so on, it's not a matter of you doing okay while we're working together. My goal is to get you to a point and give you the tools so that you can carry this on and live a healthy lifestyle. I hope to work with you as long as possible, but even after we're done, I want you to be able to carry this out for the rest of your life and maintain that healthy lifestyle. And you're not going to do that until you learn to control and do the things you do daily. Yes. Nothing changes until you change the things you do daily. And, understanding, okay, well, I had this, so I can't just do this every single day, but we had this get together and I ate here. Okay, well, I'm going to balance that out by maybe adjusting later. I'm going to, I've got this dinner coming up, so I'm going to have a little bit less that morning, or I'm going to have a drink tonight at this party. So, this get together for my friends. So maybe I do this to adjust for it.
Yeah.
And understanding that there has to be that give and take. You can't just do that all the time. And teaching them, like you said there, that 80 to 90%. It's like, okay, I don't have to, I'm not in prep, but I've got to keep in mind, I can't get too far gone, but I still can enjoy my life and teaching them how to do so.
Because there's always going to be something to do.
Always.
There's going to be a birthday party. You're going to go out for date night with your significant other. You're always going to have something you need to do.
Yes.
So establishing better choices is what I try to say. Like, I have some guys that pay me just to, they'll message me. They're going out to a restaurant because they have a work meeting or dinner with a client. Yeah. And they're like, hey, I'm going to Malone's tonight. Here's the menu. Yep. What would you order?
I have my clients do that. They'll send me the menu.
Yeah. And, I'll pick out 3 or 4 things on there that I would order to give them options. But now, anytime they go to Malone's, they kind of know what to do.
Exactly. Yeah. And again, that's, like we had said, giving them the tools to continue to do so. Yeah. It's not saying that you can't ever have something that, you can't ever have that slice of pizza or whatever else, but understanding that you can't do so every single day without paying for that.
Oh, yeah.
But and then too, helping them understand how to order food. Things that seem like second nature to us, I think a lot of times get, I don't want to say, hidden sometimes, because a lot of information that most people think they have about diet and nutrition has come from an infomercial or someone selling them something.
Trying to get them to buy some kind of fad diet or supplement. And often that stuff, if I was a shady person, I would get into fad diets and selling weight loss pills and, but I prefer to work with ethics.
Yes. Yeah.
And I want people to realize what really actually works. And oftentimes it's super simple.
It is the simple things. It's I used the term on the last show, the unsexy truth about it is like, there's no pill out there. There's nothing that's going to change your eating habits.
Yeah.
And essentially all that's going to make you gain weight or lose weight is how much you're eating. Now, there's a lot of things that factor into how much that could be.
Yeah.
But you're not going to gain weight unless you're eating more than you're burning.
Well, that's what I always say. There's calories in, there's calories out. But people often forget the calories out part.
Correct.
That's always what people forget. They're not active enough. And everybody has a different TDE where it's like, this person could live off this amount of calories. This person's metabolism, they burn a lot more during the day. So you have to make sure you're moving and producing more output at the same time of what you're eating. So
absolutely.
You can't just eat all day and stay sedentary.
Yeah.
And I think that's what a lot of people forget. You have to actually have an output.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And the only way we're going to lose weight is by burning more than we're taking in. Now we can do that by 2 ways. We can decrease what we take in, or we can increase what we put out.
Exactly.
But there begins to be a point to where you no longer have enough time in the day to burn that many damn calories. You can't outwork that fork.
Nope.
If you were to look and consider, next time you get on a treadmill, look and see how long you've been on there and how many calories that was. And then start looking at a candy bar and these type of things. It's like, okay, yeah, I don't want to be on that treadmill for an hour extra just because I couldn't dial back my food some on there. Because I'm going to be honest with you, I don't enjoy cardio. I do it when I have to. I do it for prep. But that's not something I do for fun.
Yeah.
So for me, a lot of times I would rather decrease my food a little bit than I would increase that cardio output.
I'm a lot of the same way, but I think it's because I come from a background where I didn't like to eat much as a kid. So, oftentimes I had meals, I had to remember to eat them. And I
Gotcha.
realized the importance of food, of how it made me perform.
Mhm.
But with that being said, you know, over time, I started eating, God, I forgot.
Over time, you were saying that as far as doing less cardio, so that you are doing less cardio because you eat less, you know.
Yeah. So I was, you know, I don't prefer to eat as much food. So that is always my choice whenever I'm
Yeah.
cutting for a show, is like, I'd rather eat less than do more cardio.
That's me.
On the other spectrum of people, you may have somebody that's like, I really love cardio.
Mhm.
And some of those people really enjoy food as well.
And
So
they
they'd
can eat a little
rather
bit more,
eat
yeah.
more food and do more cardio.
Mhm.
And that's just how they work. So there's no right or wrong way to do it. It's just mostly preference. Sometimes even whenever I have somebody cutting, I'm like, hey, we're at a crossroad right now. What do you prefer? Would you prefer to do more activity or eat less food? And they always have an answer. And they're very glad I asked. And they're like, honestly, man, I hate cardio. They're like you. They don't want to do it. They're like, it's the few cardio we can do, the better.
Yeah.
So I will go lower food and I will keep cardio out as long as possible.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
so like for me, you know, in my situation with that, it's, I won't say that I hate cardio. You know, the steady state stuff, I'll just find a show on my Netflix or something to watch on my phone while I do it, which helps a lot. And I'll find a series that only I'm allowed to watch while I do cardio. So then I'm kind of pumped for the next episode and I'll watch it. But, you know, like as far as some other forms of cardio, like if I'm at Derby City MMA in Louisville, shout out to those guys, you know, being able to do striking and grappling and stuff, that I really enjoy.
Yeah.
So that's not so bad. But for me, it's like I've only got so much time in the day and my workload is as such. If I'm on the treadmill for another hour because I couldn't reduce my food, now I'm just like I've got to hurry and get to
Yeah.
other things. So for me, it's, you know, it's again, I'm not going to say I enjoy the treadmill because
Yeah.
I certainly don't, but having that extra time to do work,
Exactly.
it allows me to be more efficient with my day.
That's the key there, is making sure you can live your lifestyle, what you want to do better.
Yes.
You know, if you've got a lot of work to do and you've got phone calls to do all day, you've got kids to take care of, you've got all these responsibilities.
Mhm.
Sometimes the last thing you want to be doing is sitting on a bike or a treadmill for 30 minutes to an hour. That time doesn't exist. It's not where you should be able to put your priorities. You know, other things matter.
Yeah.
So eating less food works.
Yeah. And like you said earlier, you know, like beginning to, some people want to dive off in the deep end and say, well, I want to do this, 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 and this. And they really have these, you know, delusions of grandeur and how, you know, hard they're going to go at something. And then all of a sudden life hits.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, oh yeah, well, I've got to do this. And Junior has a ball game and this one has this and so on and so on. So you have to be very realistic in your approach.
Yeah.
You know, my work schedule is this, I've got to be here at this time, so on. What can I reasonably do? You know, can I get to the gym 5 times a week to lift, or can I get there 4, whatever? And being realistic with that and then making that match your life.
That's a good point. Cause like I always have people who are like, I just don't know if I can get in the gym during the week.
Mhm.
And I tell them, I'm like, that's fine. You don't have to work out to lose weight.
Right.
And, you know, I've had plenty of clients, especially like mothers and all that, you know, they don't go to the gym. All they do is maybe walk for 30 minutes and take their baby out in a stroller, like take the dog for a walk.
Yeah.
And they eat a nutritious diet that's in a good set
Exactly.
for that. And it can be different for everybody.
It is. Yeah. And that's the thing is now I do want to make this disclaimer real quick for anybody that's listening that is a competitor or an athlete of some sort where they're going to, all that goes out the window when you're a competitor and an athlete. Everything we're talking about now is specifically for like living.
To talk about.
But with that being said, your lifestyle and this have to overlap. If you're going to live this way and maintain that, there has to be, you know, room in your life to do these things and still live your life and make those two things match.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of times you'll see a 17-year-old kid saying, if you can't get to the gym, you know, we all got the same 24 hours in the day. Well, bud, you're 17. You're a junior in high school. You live at home. Your mom drops you off the gym after school. Like, you've got time for that.
Yes.
You know, if you take a single mother who's got 2 kids and she works a full-time job and so on, that's going to be a little bit more difficult. So making sure that these things, you find ways to make that match your lifestyle, which is key.
Which with like we were talking about in competition prep, it makes it a huge difference because there's going to be some weeks where you may not want to do more cardio and eat less food, but you're going to be doing both.
Yeah.
And I've had that for myself. Like whenever I cut for a show, while it takes me a lot of food to grow new muscle tissue, it takes me very, very little. I get to low amounts to cut. And sometimes my cardio will get high as well.
Yeah.
And that's because my job used to be walking around and training people all day.
Oh, yeah.
You know what it is now? I sit at a desk.
Sure.
And I'm on the computer. My steps daily, if I don't try, are sometimes under 3,000 or under 2,000.
Yeah.
Which is a really low amount for me. So I have to sometimes do both.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And you'll see that sometimes you'll start to increase food and you're like, okay, well, we're not seeing a change. You'll increase farther. And then whenever you start to cut, you make that decrease. It's like, okay, we got to go even farther. So, and there's so many things that affect that. We were talking about this earlier, but all those outside sources in your life, changes in jobs, stress from things in your life, relationship stress, whatever else, all those things affecting
the silent killer. Relationship problems I've seen destroy people in just general nutrition settings. Competition prep settings. It's who you're with. What I try to get people to do, and I think it's very important, is if you're trying to start any type of weight loss goal or go into competition prep, is have a conversation with your significant other. And that's what made the difference in this prep for me. Like, first of all, my wife now is a IFBB pro figure competitor. She understands this lifestyle. But even then, at certain points in prep, I would tell her like, hey, I'm noticing myself being very irritable right now. It's nothing against you. It's just, part of the supplementation I'm using. Low food. I'm tired. And she understood that. But I feel like a lot of people don't have that conversation. And then that stuff builds up and you just keep living life. And it's like, oh, you're no longer helping out around the house. You're no longer, showing any attention to them at all. And you haven't told them why. So they're confused. Or in the general nutrition aspect, it can be completely different. They may not be on board with you losing weight. They may be trying to still live a completely different lifestyle. And then you're trying to force that on them. But at the same time, they're being a bad influence to you.
And you have that
so many different ways.
You had that conflict. And you wouldn't make, if you're in a serious relationship, you wouldn't make a huge decision without consulting with them and discussing it anyway. And whenever you're going to do something that requires you change your entire daily structure, it's a pretty big deal.
It
especially
needs to be discussed.
It does need to be discussed. Again, big differences between prepping for a show and just changing for the sake of your health. As far as the commitment level and the work level that's involved. But either way, and then having their support is invaluable. Like it is, you're not, whenever you see a bodybuilding show and you see that competitor on stage, they're up there alone, but this is a team sport.
It becomes that
very
way.
Much,
very fast
very
too.
Much. Between, your coach, your people around you, especially your significant other. Like in the shows that I've done in the past, I've been very fortunate to have a wonderful group of people around me. This last show that we did together, that you helped me with in 21, I was in a horrible spot with my joints. This was prior to me having my shoulders replaced. It was a lot of pain. I was having to use anti-inflammatories all the time. It was affecting my sleep. I was irritable. I was not the most pleasant individual, but I was lucky to have a wonderful girlfriend who's now my fiance to support me. My business partner, she's an angel. She was there to support me. And those people that made that easier for me. Now, if I had been in a position where I had, a toxic situation that, kept me stressed, and now I'm dealing with the stress of this prep and the stress of the pain from my joints and all these other things, it would be overwhelming.
And it becomes a thing where if you don't keep your relationship under control and have the right person beside you, it can lead to lack of sleep.
A lot of things.
Just a lot of bad issues, which are not going to allow you to progress in the ways you want to progress.
Absolutely.
And I think some people forget that. They try to fight through, but you have to have your surroundings set up. And I think relationship, like we said, is the key there.
It is.
It makes me think of Has there been any time in the past where you haven't been set up like that and you've tried to do a competition prep? Like you didn't have the best surroundings?
Oh my God.
Yeah.
So the first actual, big win that I had in 2017, the situation going into it was less than ideal. And I had a lot of stress in my life.
Yep.
And I'm thankful now that all that stuff sorted out and everyone, is doing great. But there was a lot of stress in my life and my body was not responding the same way. And I went to a national show after having won an overall and my body didn't respond. I was holding water, couldn't sleep, all these things.
Yeah.
And you look back on those things and you're like, okay, yeah, your body's only going to do what your mind tells it to.
Mm-hmm.
And whenever your mind is completely ruined from stress or anything else, and it makes it extremely difficult, not to mention too, just pushing through things and doing that work, that daily grind on everything. It's.
Yeah. So I got one more story to tell you that I think is a good example of this. And it was back whenever I did my last prep before this one. It was in 2019. And it was in a very bad position. I was in an old relationship. It just wasn't working out. We had very different ideas. Nothing wrong with that. People move forward. But
yeah, absolutely.
I decided to continue my prep when we had split up. And I look back and I probably shouldn't because I was stressed out all the time. I probably lost, a good amount of muscle just from the stress I was going under. I was overdoing cardio. I was trying to do everything to still get in shape. And my body didn't want to do that. It was very clear to me. And I still went through with it and I still finished because in my mind, I'm like, I'm one that just doesn't give up. And that was probably one situation where I probably should have stepped back and been like, you're not going to be your best.
Yeah.
Yeah. And now the tale of two preps, I go into a different one with a significant other that understands what I'm doing. They want to see me do well. They're like, cheering me on the whole way. They're helping me out the best they can. They're not making me worry about anything else. There's no arguments or fights or any issues. I place the best I've ever placed and I look the best I've ever looked.
Yes.
And that makes all the difference. And that was the tale of two preps.
And all the things that come with that. Like when you think of what stress does to your body in a normal setting outside of prep or anything else, stress will kill you. It's terrible. And then whenever you take that and you couple it with eating very little amounts of food. You're irritable because you're tired, you're hungry. You're on supplementation and enhancement that has affected your hormone levels. So now your mind's not quite as, it's a little more, things are a little more shaky. All these things just continue to multiply and build upon that. And it makes it a lot harder. So having the people around you that make that easier and they take that stress off you is it's so important.
The less variables you have going on in your life and the more consistent it is, the better you're going to be.
Yeah. And if you're in a bad spot already, starting prep is not going to help that.
Oh no, it's the worst idea. Like I said, but with that, have conversations, communication is key.
It is.
With any relationship, I always say, if you communicate well, the relationship will usually be very good. But if you lose track of that communication, you guys aren't talking, it's a lot of stored up energy and then it all explodes at once. And the last time you want that to happen is when you're trying to compete in a show or, reach a goal that you've been trying to reach forever.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, that's, and having that support. And that's why a lot of times in the off season or when I'm outside of prep, I try to make sure and go the opposite end of the spectrum and make myself more available, make time more available for those people, because it is, when you have to be a bit selfish when you're inside of that prep for a sporting event like that. Everything revolves around your diet, your timing, your structure, your workouts, all that. So making sure to give back to all those people that help you through that is everything.
That's why I always try to take my parents and my family out to eat after I do a prep and hang out with them because I'm like, hey, thanks.
Sorry I've been a dick for the last 6
Thanks for understanding. I couldn't talk to you for 6 weeks. It happens. But
that's right.
That's all for today, man. It's good to see you again.
Great seeing you, brother. This has been Bedson and Coffey Unfiltered. Thank you guys for listening.
Make sure to go follow us on social media.